know, the four original Eagles, none of us were from California. Don was from Texas, and Bernie was from Florida, Meisner was from Nebraska, and I was from Detroit. So maybe this mythical place, you know, was mythical to us as well, you know, and so maybe we were able to help enhance the imagery because we were so caught up with it ourselves. We ourselves, you know, we were seduced.
And I want to sleep with you in the desert tonight, with a billion stars all around.
California, the dream of success. The imagery, you know, is by people like you said, by the Beach Boys and the Birds and the magazines that I would read and the stuff I saw on television. It was the promised land. It's always been the promised land.
You won't let me down. I'm already standing on the ground.
I lived in Echo Park with Jackson Brown and J.D. Souther. I met J.D. the first day I was in California. He was already dating my girlfriend's sister. So I met him the first night I got to California. And we hit it off.
I think we had a publishing deal where we got, one of us got $40 a week and one got $50 a week. The deal from the publisher's point of view was that they hoped we'd turn in a few songs every few months. But they didn't like what we wrote. And they would try to get us to write songs for people's sessions specifically. You know, meanwhile, Glenn and I are like smoking bongs of hash and you know, whatever else we're doing and writing these bizarre minor key songs about our own experience. It had nothing to do with these guys.
And then we were playing together for a couple years as a wacky little folk duo. Then we met Jackson at a benefit for the Free Clinic.
Yeah, the house on Laguna was a place we all lived for a period of time. I lived in one of the upstairs apartments, and then Glenn moved in next door, and then I got rid of the upstairs apartment because I could pay, instead of $7 a month, I could pay $30, so I moved down into this sort of basement below them. And we became pretty good friends quickly, you know, because they were up all night singing, you know. It was either like, you know, grit your teeth or go up there and sing with them, you know, so.
Get run, ain't no stopping till I make a borderline.
But I used to hitchhike from Echo Park to the Troubadour, you know, 3 or 4 nights a week. And I always managed to get a ride home. He was a great hitchhiker.
I don't know why. I think I had this fringe jacket, this leather fringe jacket, and real long hair, and he could stick up a thumb and somebody would hit the brakes. Just worked every time. I think I met Glenn at the Troubadour Bar. It could have been at the record company headquarters. We were both signed to the same label. He and J.D. Souther were Long Branch Penny Whistle, and my group Shiloh were on a record company called Amos. Glenn did come up to me one night in the Troubadour Bar and say, look, my group's breaking up, and I think yours is too. Would you like to go on the road with Linda Ronstadt and make $200 a week? And I said, sure, sounds good to me.
You better let somebody love you.
We talked about drummers, and Henley's name came up, and the fact that he could sing, you know, which would be good, because Linda did a lot of songs with harmony, and we got him to be the drummer, and we started rehearsing, and we went on the road. About a week into that 3-week tour with Linda, Don and I sort of hatched the plot to have our own band, which eventually became the Eagles. Don and I, our team was born out of a little bit out of desperation, a little bit out of fear, a little bit out of insecurity. You know, Don and I, as individuals, had not written a lot of songs, period, prior to the days of the Eagles. The chemistry turned out to be really something really good, and Jackson and J.D. liked the first couple songs that we wrote together.
J.D. and Jackson co-wrote a lot of the early Eagles songs with us, and they were an inspiration to both Glenn and myself. They had already been signed, of course, by a big label and were considered a viable entity by record company Big Shot. So we looked up to them.
Don and Glenn are like the odd couple. Glenn was the really mercurial sort of, like Flash, sensibly. He had lots of, boundless energy, and Don was really very analytical and methodical, and he had the patience and the desire to hammer these songs into exactly what he knew. They made a really, really good combination.
Working with those two guys, writing with those guys, had all the great elements of collaboration. It was very protracted. It was slow. As slow as molasses writing together. But we had this thing, we had Glenn with this spontaneous walking around with a cigarette, playing the piano, playing guitar, keeping this groove going, while Don and I pull our hair out and criticize everything.
We had sort of me, this guy with a million chords that, well, what about this? Well, then maybe how about this one? Let's, da-da-da-da-da. And then we had someone like Don who's, very bright. And, good story sense and good word sense.
Glenn had certain talents and certain personality traits that I didn't have. He was less inhibited. He was more, more brave about trying things, as far as songwriting. Songwriting was new to me, and he encouraged me and brought me out. I was a little bit shy, and he would just sit there with a guitar and just sing anything, even if it was lousy, just to get things going. And he was a great encouragement, and I admired his balls, for the way he worked. He was a good coach. He got everybody up and excited.
Well, I'm running down a road.
They had this way of sort of encompassing everything around them, like marking off the terrain that was all around them and making that the most important thing, not only to them, but to anybody that met them. You got drawn into their story.
Why you still can.
I just think we sort of grew up, it's the songs we wrote and sang when we were 23 and 24 or 25. They have a certain optimism, maybe a certain naivete about them, and then I think as we grew more experienced and more confident, and we felt that maybe we could write about other things.
The one thing that's constant about all those songs and all those records, I think, is that we try to tell the truth about whatever our vision of things was, however small or however large you think our vision, or their vision in the case of the whole band. So the fact that things got darker, to me, only says one thing. We were growing up and getting older and finding out that power and money didn't solve problems, it just changed the face of them.
On the dark desert highway, at the top of the night.
We also became a louder, harder-edged band with the addition of Joe Walsh, adding Don Felder, changing producers, going from Glenn Johns, who was an Englishman who loved American country music and didn't think we could rock and roll. The faces can knock you guys.
Welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place, such a lovely place, such a lovely place.
But I saw through the Eagles and as far as their acoustic cowboy, LA cowboydom, and saw rockers dying and screaming to get out. And I think I helped them.
Well, mighty Gibson and twisted. She got the Mercedes Benz.
They asked me questions like, how many mics did you put on the drums? And when I said, 7 or 8 or 9, they went, yeah, that's good, that's good.
every album we kept pushing the bar up a few more notches. We just had to surpass ourselves. It had to be greater. And every track on the record, every detail on every guitar line, and every drum beat, and every background vocal, just everything that went on those records really got pushed to the maximum.
We just tried to get things right, you know. We tried to do good work. We strived for excellence. There's no such thing as perfection, especially in rock and roll. It's peasant music. It's a popular culture medium. It's cultural graffiti. You know, it's not about perfectionism. We just strive to do things right. We tried to get things in tune. We tried to get things in time. We tried to write lyrics that made sense. And if that's perfectionism, I have no apologies to make for it.
John and Glenn were the chief nitpickers, and they would just not leave something alone until they were 100% satisfied with it. And sometimes that would take 2-3 days for whatever it is that we're working on, a verse or a chorus or a guitar part or whatever it was. And then a week later, we'd hit the record button and do it all over again. 2-3 times maybe.
When I first joined the band and went back into the record plant, I thought I'd joined a band that had just broken up. Because everybody was yelling and screaming, and I just realized that that's the way the band worked. I mean, that was just kind of the ongoing motif, you know, was dissension and kind of stress and tension.
Any rock and roll band is like a kindergarten class. It just is. People, you know, it's like, it can get so petty and so trite. It's just unbelievable. So I just chalked it all up to that sort of thing. And then it wasn't. It was much bigger than that.
A lot of the struggle was originally, you know, everyone wanted to sing 2 songs on every record or something. And sometimes they were like, it would be better to have like 6 Henley songs on a record. And that's really where the conflict came.
The dynamic in the Eagles, the interpersonal relationships within the band, were really not that different from any other rock and roll band. You know, there's dissension in any band. All men are created equal. You know, never was there a bigger lie printed and believed. As long as people understand what they do best and are content to do that, then everything's fine. But when every guy in the band wants to be everything, then things start to disintegrate.
Oh, they didn't get it, couldn't carry on that way.
We had done a lot in the confines of a 5-piece band. But, you know, I think musically it was probably time for us to get away from each other and you know, play with some other people.
In my opinion, people in a rock and roll group or in any group should be content with and proud of their particular gift. Everybody in this group has a particular gift. Everybody's really good at something. Everybody can't do everything. And, you know, egos start getting in the way, and therein lies the problem. And that's where we had trouble. But we still managed to get through 8.5 years of thrashing about and disagreeing. We still managed to create out of that. And I think that's really the important thing.
Well, actually, I think when it was over was when the live album came out, and on the label, it was a bird's nest with hand grenade. We're often, you know, portrayed as a serious band. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not just twisted and have a weird sense of humor. When I think we're a band that's broken up to put hand grenades in a bird's nest on the label of the LP, I think that, you know, that's pretty funny.
Tonight, catch Glenn Frey as L.A. Private Eye Cody McMahon in another action-packed episode of South of Sunset. Tonight at 10:30 on VH1.
I don't know what that is. All this legacy business. I think time will sort that out. You know, I mean, some people would tell you that we've contributed a lot to popular music, and some people think we're an absolute plague. So I have no idea what that's about.
It's another tequila sunrise, slowly across the sky.
I'm I'm not sure if we fully realized what a demand there was for us to get back together and play live. The success of the Common Thread album reminded all of us, I think, that there was still a relatively large audience out there that wanted to see us get back together and tour again, play live.
You know, there's a lot of things I want to do that are away from the Eagles, you know, but this is an experience people have been wanting us to do it for 14 years, and so we've finally gone ahead and done it, and, you know, I think we'll go on for a little while and then take a break, and then I think we'll talk about it again.
We took a plane across the sea to some foreign land.
One of the questions that was just like piercing everyone's mind is, can we do this again? Are we going to be as good as we were? Because no one really wanted to go out and be less than our own expectations, much less than what everyone publicly thought of us.
I was nervous. I knew that you could be a legend in your parents' basement when you're first starting out, but getting out in front of people.
The very first time was that MTV special, and I'll tell you, for us to make those our first shows being filmed was fairly ballsy, and I thought it was pretty stupid. But also, in a way, it was like riding a bike. It's like, hey, here we go, let's just do it.
I personally have a very high tolerance for repetition, which is one of the prerequisites for lasting in this business, I think, is to have a high tolerance for monotony. So I really don't mind singing these songs over and over again from night to night, because as soon as you hit the first note, the audience gives you your energy. They go nuts. And when you hear that roar, that's really all you need to keep going.
When I was writing with Don, the day we wrote Get Over It, we got really excited. That was nice to know that, we could go back and sit down and, write a song together again 14 years, after having not done it for about 14 years, to be able to actually, achieve that was great.
I think time really does sort out the men from the boys, It's the test. The fact that we've been away from all this for 14 years, I think, speaks highly for the music. In the end, it's not really your image or what kind of shirt you wore or how long your hair is or how much money you made that people will remember.